Shema Israel, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shalom, it's Tyrell. I'm here today with Michael Snyder, and today we're going to get into some of the hot topics of what's going on in the world today. It's hard to really understand exactly 100% what's going to take place till they actually do, but we can toss around some ideas of what we think and what we're hearing at least. But the first thing I want to get into is actually not on my list of something that I was being made aware of today. I don't know if you're made aware of it. I was listening to a video earlier from Amir Safadi that Israel actually struck and I believe hit, I want to say, is the Iranian embassy and killed a general in Iran today. Had you heard any news on that?
I have. In fact, I just posted an article about this. So this is huge. This is huge, right? Because this war, and I refer to it as one of the three wars of the apocalypse. I believe that World War III will be defined by, the United States and Russia, United States and China, but then a great war in the Middle East. And I believe that what we have already seen is the beginning of that, the beginning of the great war in the Middle East that all of us that love Bible prophecy, we've been waiting for. I believe we've seen the beginnings of that, and we've been waiting for it to escalate to the next level. And so this is very interesting timing because we're about to enter a new biblical year. The biblical calendar on April 8th is about to, and as we're getting ready to do that, of course, Israel's saying that Israel said, hey, well, it looks like we're going to go into Rafah either in mid-April or then after Passover in early May, one of those two. So we are expecting this thing to ramp up. And then today, Israel conducts this airstrike. Missiles are fired from the airspace over the Golan Heights at this building. Now, it was apparently a building that was directly next to the Iranian embassy in Damascus. I've seen reports where it was actually the residence of the ambassador from Iran to Syria, and basically right next to the embassy there. But it looks like Israel was targeting a meeting, a gathering of very important regional leaders, including the head of the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps. And so that's huge. Basically the top guy over the Revolutionary Guard in Iran, that's huge. That's a huge victory for Israel. But then, what's going to happen? Iran is already saying they're going to respond, and the response is going to be harsh, is the word that they're using. Syria, of course, is very upset about all this, but this is one of the things that could cause the region to explode, and where we could potentially see an all-out war, an apocalyptic war, because right now it's not an apocalyptic war yet, but I believe that it will become one. And when it does, I believe it's going to shock the entire world. But I have been waiting, and we've been waiting for this because it's been kind of simmering at a low level. Most of the action's been between Israel and Hamas in the south. But once this thing explodes in the north, it's going to get crazy because, Israel could potentially be facing Hezbollah, which has an army of about 100,000 troops or more, and they've got 150,000, 200,000 missiles. Nobody knows exactly how many, but it's a vast arsenal. So that's Hezbollah. Then they could also, at the same time, Syria, they keep getting bombed. Damascus keeps getting hit. So Syria is likely to jump in. Iran itself, and then you've got all the other militias in Iraq and elsewhere that are backed by Iran, and you combine all those forces, Israel's going to basically be outnumbered at that point if all of them join forces against Israel all at once. And in that kind of a scenario, if Tel Aviv and Jerusalem and those other Israeli cities are being bombarded by missiles, and if all the combined forces of Hezbollah, Syria, and Iran make a move to try to go against Israel, I think we could potentially see a scenario where Israel brings out the big guns, and I'm talking about nuclear weapons. I think we could eventually see that. So I am extremely concerned about this, and what we've just witnessed today definitely has the potential to take things to the next level.
Yeah, when I heard Damascus, the first thing I think of was that prophecy where it says that one day Damascus is going to be completely wiped out or ruin or completely. Obviously, that has not completely happened. It just took out a building, and I heard that an Iranian general was killed in the airstrike. But still, I mean, we're heading right towards that prophecy too.
Yeah, yeah. So, and that with what I just described, the kind of scenario I just described, because we know Israel has nuclear weapons, and if Israel's existence is threatened, if they feel like, you know, their backs are to a wall, if thousands and thousands of missiles are raining down on their cities, Israel, I believe, would use nuclear weapons, and one of the targets would be Damascus.
All right, well, let's move on now to stuff later in the month. We just flipped the calendar over to April, and we're getting closer to the new year. I know different people look at different calendars and can be really confusing. We're getting closer to the new year, which I believe starts on April 8th over there, or is it April 9th?
Well, in Israel, according to the calendar, the Jewish people, the Jewish calendar, and the calendar that many Messianics and Hebrew roots follow as well, at sundown on April 8th is when the first day of the first month on the Jewish calendar, on the biblical calendar. And so, interestingly, at sundown over there, it'll be dark. The first day of the first month will already have begun, but it will still be light here in North America, Tyrell. Mm-hmm. And so we will have the eclipse. We'll have the sun, and then it'll be blocked out by the moon, and it'll still be daylight over here and then the eclipse will happen. But on the other side of the world, in Jerusalem, the first day of the first month of the year will have just begun because the sun will be set over there. So it's fascinating to me that everything we're going to be talking about regarding April 8th, it literally falls on the beginning of the year as the year begins in Jerusalem, in Israel. And so to me, I think this biblical year is being marked in some way. God is saying, hey, you know, this year is special in some way.
I just think we're going to get into this, but the timing of these events, it's not that they're necessarily a lot of things happen on one day, but it's the beginning of the beginning of their year too. It's just right around the spring feast time. The timing is perfect, and I don't think it's coincidence at all. But I believe before, and I could be wrong, this could be an April 8th ordeal as well, but I thought I'd looked and saw the planets aligning is actually going to happen a few days before on April 4th. Is that correct?
Well, there's a planetary alignment of 4 planets. And in a planetary alignment, when you're looking out from Earth, it looks like they're all stacked behind one another, because imagine a straight line going out from Earth, kind of, if you imagine like a shish kebab or a ruler going out from Earth, and then all the planets, you know, lining up along that ruler or that shish kebab. It's a line straight out from Earth, and that is happening on April 4th, where there's an alignment of 4 planets, and then you could add in the Earth to make it 5, but it's a very unique planetary alignment. But then on April 8th, there's something different happening, because on April 8th, it's not a planetary alignment, not as scientists use that technical term where they're kind of lined up straight out from Earth. But on April 8th, if you look up in the night sky from Jerusalem toward the east on April 8th, the day of the eclipse, the first day of the biblical year, and this was discovered by a friend named Rachel Baxter. Some in the audience might know her. She's Messianic. She's Hebrew roots too. And she has videos on YouTube where she talks about this if people are interested in learning more. But and I just posted a picture that she sent me in an article that I posted yesterday. But all 7 planets in our solar system, plus all of the other 7 planets, plus the sun, plus the moon, will appear to form a line in the sky. So instead of all lining up behind one another, you look up in the sky and they appear to be in a straight line looking from the east, from Jerusalem. So they appear to be in a line. So Rachel Baxter thought this must be pretty rare. So she asked ChatGPT, how rare is this? You know, and ChatGPT responded and said, well, this is something that would happen about once every 32 million years. So yeah, we've got a planetary alignment of 4 planets on April 4th, 4 days before the eclipse of April 8th. But then on April 8th itself, literally all the other planets in our solar system and the sun and the moon will all be lined up in a line in the sky looking from the east, from Jerusalem. It's almost as if the heavens are screaming at us, literally, pay attention. What is happening is important.
Yeah, I mean, we read in Genesis in the beginning that he created the sun, moon, stars, all that for signs and seasons, Moed, Moedim. And I mean, they're for warning. They're for warning us. And actually, last week there was a different type of eclipse, much less talked about. Correct?
At the end of March there was another eclipse. Now this was a lunar eclipse. It was a blood moon, and it was actually interestingly on the second day of Purim. You know, which I thought was very interesting because blood moons are often associated with war. And then, you know, and Purim, of course, is we read the book of Esther, and it was a time when Israel's enemies thought they were going to get the best of Israel, and they were going to wipe out the Jewish people. But instead, the Jewish people end up getting the upper hand on their enemies. And, you know, and that was the time of Haman. And we've got Hamas today, and Netanyahu actually made a connection between the two. He gave a speech to the troops and said, just like we were victorious at that time, we're going to be victorious now. But so we had this blood moon Purim eclipse, which was very interesting at March 25th. And now we're seeing this thing start to ramp up, and I think we are in a time when we're going to have a showdown between Israel and her enemies. And I think Israel's enemies, they've been preparing for this war for a long time. I think they think they're going to get the upper hand. But in the end, Israel is going to be the one to triumph. So I thought that was very interesting that we had that sign in the heavens as well, just near the end of March.
Yeah, that actually stood out to me because I just got back this past weekend from being on vacation. Our family, we went to Tennessee, and we were actually at Bill Cloud's congregation, Jacob's tent, and then a couple days later, the day of that other eclipse, the blood moon eclipse, we actually were in Kentucky, and we went to the Ark Encounter and the Creation Museum, and obviously we're talking about the eclipse and the signs in the skies and everything. It's a warning, and this is taking place on the exact same day that I'm at the Ark Encounter. And this is going to be like as in the days of Noah, and I'm just like, I'm seeing this, and it's like where I am right now. It's just like I can feel it inside me. Something's going on. I mean, I didn't plan to be at the Ark Encounter the same day of eclipse or nothing like that, and I'm back home now, which I will be for the April 8th eclipse. But let's go into that. The first thing that I thought was interesting, there's a lot we can talk about the April 8th eclipse, but NASA's actually wanting to shoot rockets at the eclipse. What are they trying to prove with this? What are you expecting out of this thing?
Yeah, Tyrell, it's very weird because this is going to be, for some reason NASA decided to do this on April 8th, which is okay. Why out of all the days you're going to pick the day of the Great American Eclipse? And they're firing 3 rockets into the moon's shadow. And, you know, the goal, they're saying, okay, you know, we're going to measure some things. It's just scientific or whatever. Okay. But then they've chosen a name for this project of firing these 3 rockets into the moon's shadow. And they've named it after a serpent deity, Apep, that was popular in ancient Egypt. So this serpent deity was apparently the nemesis of the sun deity Ra, according to NASA. But this is very weird, because first of all, why would they pick April 8th, the day of the Great American Eclipse? And secondly, well, I guess they're doing some measurements of the eclipse, but why would they want to choose this name of a deity, of an ancient Egyptian deity, a serpent deity? But of course, we've seen this with NASA and, over and over again, where they use the names of pagan gods, ancient gods, to name spacecraft, to name missions, to name projects. It's for those of us that love Torah, that's very uncool, but it's like they're obsessed with this stuff. We see they're obsessed, the elite are obsessed with this stuff. They love the names of the old gods for some reason, and we see them keep popping up, and this is another example of that.
Yeah, I'm going to get just a little bit ahead, and we're going to come right back to the eclipse, but where you talk about the names of different things, it popped up to me. April 21st, which is actually the day before Passover, there's going to be a comet going by, and they're calling it the Devil Comet. Had you heard of that? It's supposedly the streaks kind of makes it look like two horns. I'm like, just the name and all the stuff going on this month. And sure enough, it's the night before Passover. That was really interesting. It's like, this is not coincidence. He is trying to shake us, warn us, get your popcorn ready, get your seatbelt on, whatever.
Yeah, so this Devil Comet, for the first time in 71 years, here comes the Devil Comet, right? And apparently it's visible to some people in the Northern Hemisphere to the naked eye right now. And it'll continue to make its run throughout the month of April as we go along. And so it'll be visible to the naked eye during the April 8th eclipse, the Great American Eclipse, and then through Passover, as you're talking about, as it makes its run through the solar system. But this is very, very rare. And interestingly, okay, we've got a pattern, and I just wrote about this today, just posted an article about this. We saw the same pattern before, okay? Because in 1811, there was Tecumseh's comet, okay? And there was a solar eclipse in 1806, which went from the west coast to the east coast of the United States, then another eclipse, solar eclipse in 1811, which crossed the other way, crossed about in the vicinity of Cleveland, Ohio, forming a giant X over the heartland of America, right there near the New Madrid fault zone. And that was completed in September 1811. And then about the same time, this Tecumseh's comet is going by, prior to the 3 months after the second earthquake, we had the New Madrid fault zone went nuts. And a series of gigantic earthquakes, the biggest earthquakes in the entire history of the continental United States in 1811 and 1812, just went crazy, creating giant crevices in the earth, causing the Mississippi River to run backwards at one point. The biggest earthquakes were felt in Boston, Washington, D.C., over a vast area, caused tremendous death and destruction. Thankfully, that area of the country was not highly populated at the time, but there were a number of deaths and so forth, but just caused tremendous shaking. And okay, so we had the pattern. Two eclipses forming a giant X over America. We have the Tecumseh's comet, and then we had the New Madrid quake. Now in 2024, we've got the two eclipses, which we can talk about, forming the giant X over America. We've got the comet, the Devil Comet is here, right? And so will history repeat itself? Well, we know that another great New Madrid earthquake is coming at some point in the future. Now, how soon will it be? We don't know. I want to make it very clear to those watching, I don't expect any type of disaster or emergency or accident or anything unusual necessarily to happen on April 8th itself, because I believe April 8th is a sign. I believe it's a warning. And see, I believe that you get the warning, and then the stuff you're being warned about comes after, and that's the pattern we saw with this other one, where it had the giant X over America and the comet, and then the New Madrid went crazy 3 months after the second earthquake. But so I could be wrong. April 8th may come, and there may be some crazy disaster or whatever, but I'm not expecting it. I'm not anticipating it. I believe that, and so a lot of people, when we get to April 8th, they're going to say, man, that was kind of a dud, because they were expecting some big thing in the news to happen, when the big thing that's happening is this eclipse over our heads. And we're going to talk about all the signs and things it's doing. And the most ominous sign in the entire history of our country is happening right above our heads. Meanwhile, all the other planets in our solar system and the sun and the moon are like lining up in the sky, literally screaming at us to pay attention. That's what's happening on April 8th. So no, I'm not expecting a big earthquake on April 8th. I'm not expecting any type of natural disaster or anything else on that date, but I believe it's a sign, a warning, a threshold that we're crossing into a new period of time. I believe that it's a warning about judgment on our country. And interestingly, a lot of people, of course, they're going to travel to the path of the eclipse. A lot of people are holding watch parties. They're celebrating. Millions of Americans are literally going to be having a party and celebrating as the sign of judgment is literally passing over our heads.
Yeah, I've watched on Facebook and online and people talking about it, and we're told in 1 Thessalonians 5 to watch and be sober, pay attention. A lot of people they'll stop at verse 2 in chapter 5, where it says that no man knows the day or hour. I mean, where it talks about, but if you read 2 verses later, it says, but you are children of light. You will know if you pay attention, you watch, you are discerning these times. And April 8th is going to come, and it's very likely that nothing happens directly on that date, as you've spoken of, and people are going to be like, see, you crazy people, you conspiracy theorists. But when a seed is planted, you don't necessarily see the growth right away. And I can't remember if it was you or somebody else I listened to a day or so ago mentioned, when a child is conceived, the mother's not showing right away. I mean, it may take some little bit of time. It started on April 8th possibly, but you may not see the after effects till later. And maybe it could. You mentioned the New Madrid fault line, which I'm just going to ask your opinion on, which this could go many different ways. But I've seen I think the U.S. Navy made those maps of if that earthquake takes place, and it could split the United States in two, or it could cause water to go this way or that way. How bad could this potentially be, that earthquake, the landscape of the United States?
Yeah, this is something that I write about in all my books that I've talked about for a long time, because this is so important. Someday there will be and there could be, tomorrow there might be an earthquake along the New Madrid Fault, okay? But I'm talking about one that will literally rip the continent of North America in half. And so many people have been shown by God that this will happen someday. In fact, so many of them have supernatural experiences where God showed them someday there will be a catastrophic apocalyptic earthquake along the New Madrid Fault that literally from the Gulf of Mexico all the way to the Great Lakes, a new body of water will be created, because they will be so cataclysmic, it will literally rip the United States in half, creating a new body of water, separating the country in two. And what God has shown, and I wrote about this in Lost Prophecies of the Future of America, over and over again, God has shown people that it's because once we're involved in the dividing of the land of Israel, in fact, God came out and told several of them, hey, because they divided my land, I'm going to divide their land. So what we're watching for is that a division, a formal division of the land of Israel. And the Biden administration is talking about, after this war, we need a Palestinian state. That's what they want as the end result of this war. And that's what Saudi Arabia is pushing for, others are pushing for. And I think that's what they're ultimately going to get once this war is finally over. And because the world's going to be crying out for peace, they're going to get this agreement, a Palestinian state will be created, and that will be that. So a lot of people are saying, oh, are we going to have the big one, the big New Madrid quake on April 8th? No, because we haven't seen Israel formally divided yet. But once Israel is formally divided, that's what comes first. And then at some point after, might be a day, might be a week, might be a month, a year. We don't know the time interval. But sometime after that, there's going to be this cataclysmic earthquake, which will literally change the geography of America forever. So all these people out there who say, oh, dividing Israel's no big deal. Well, God is so concerned about it, the dividing of his land, that he's literally going to divide an entire continent over it. That's, and we've seen the pattern, right? We've seen the pattern over and over. We just saw it. We just saw the pattern where there's a move against Israel or to divide the land of Israel, and then something happens, a disaster happens. We just saw it last week, right? At the United Nations, right? What happened? The Biden administration did not veto the anti-Israel resolution that was brought before the Security Council. The Netanyahu government was counting on them to veto that resolution. The Biden administration said, no, we're going to let it pass. And then the next morning, the Baltimore Bridge collapse happened, the very next morning. And of course, there's dozens of other examples like that, and I've documented some of them. But this pattern keeps happening over and over again, and our leaders never learn their lesson. But then the biggest one of all is going to come up once they, get this Palestinian state that they want. And then bam, our entire continent is literally going to be divided in two.
I don't think people quite realize, even if they hear that, they may think that, yeah, people from Missouri, Iowa, Illinois, they're going to have oceanfront property now. It's more than that. The destruction that comes with earthquakes, one thing, but I could see this really affecting even the power grid, the internet, and really crippling the country. And the United States for a long time has been their biggest ally, the biggest protector. And if we're crippled, who's to protect them anymore? They're going to, it could get ugly. But the next thing, this is kind of a longer question, and it's CERN. Explain to us kind of what is CERN? What are they trying to do by starting this up? And what do you think could possibly even happen? Because it's dangerous stuff, sounds like.
Well, I hope that nothing happens with this, but it turns out also on April 8th, for some reason, CERN, which is, kind of the long name of it is the European Organization for Nuclear Research, but is better known as CERN. But they've got their Large Hadron Collider, and for some reason, they've decided, they've had a long wait now, and they've decided on April 8th, the same day as the eclipse, for some reason, they're going to fire it up, and, they're going to bang these particles into one another. And so, they're going to basically shoot particles down a 17-mile long tunnel at nearly the speed of light. And the goal, they say, is to recreate conditions a second after the Big Bang. Now, I don't know about you, Tyrell, but that does not sound like a very good idea to me. But why do that first of all, why pick April 8th? Okay, they know that it's the day of the eclipse, and of course they've got that statue out in front of Shiva, the destroyer, the pagan god, right in front, and one of their executives has even publicly said, hey, this thing, we know that it could open up a door and we might send something through it, or something might come through from the other side. And so they've talked about that, and that type of thing. To me, it's very, very foolish what they're doing. Could they blow something up? Could they create a disaster? Who knows what they happen? What kind of portals they could create or open? There's a lot of speculation about all these things. I don't know if anything will happen, if anything won't happen. The good news, I guess, if you want to put it that, is we know that they're not going to cause the end of the world, because that's, we know that, the end of the book tells us how things play out. So the good news is we know they're at least not going to destroy the world with what they're doing. But theoretically, what they're doing is so reckless. And of course, this is not the only collider in existence around the globe. It's just kind of the best known, but there's other colliders around the world. I was just reading a Wikipedia article about that today. So there's other colliders out there doing similar work, very foolish, very stupid. But today, humanity is at this point where we're in secret labs all around the planet. They're monkeying around with some of the most dangerous bugs ever known to humanity, and an accident can happen. We saw that happen, a few years ago, where something got loose and spread all over the world. And and they're conducting other sorts of experiments with physics and particles and all kinds of things. Very, very reckless. So, I mean, given enough time, I think we would just completely destroy ourselves anyway, in so many different ways. And we are literally destroying the entire planet. That's a whole nother topic. But we need Yeshua to come back. We need Messiah to come back, because given enough time, we would literally destroy ourselves.
Yeah, it's I just can't get over, and like I said, it's not coincidence at all that everything is taking place at the exact same time. And a lot of people are just ignoring it because they've been told for years that, oh, in 1988, or oh, at this time, or we're living in the last days. They've been saying that for years. So a lot of people are just kind of ignoring it. I can't help but watch. I'm not fearing for my life or anything like that. And I'm not telling people this is going to happen on this date. I'm just, I'm paying attention. I'm going to watch and I'm going to see. Because like you mentioned, we know how the end of the book, what's going to take place and how things are all going to play out, but we don't know exactly when things are going to kick off. One thing that is making people really wonder if things are going to kick off is the whole Red Heifer ordeal. And I was actually talking to Rico Cortez a couple days ago, and he is not, he's big into the Third Temple, and he was actually talking to a rabbi over in Israel the other day. He does not believe that it's going to happen as soon as some others do, but a lot of people really do believe that this could be happening very, very soon. I believe the Red Heifers are of age now, but they can't wait too long because they've got like a year window or whatever, then they'll be disqualified because they're too old. So you don't want to wait too long, but this could be happening very soon. I'm not saying it's going to take place at Passover this year. I don't know for a fact, but I very well see something happening here in the coming months, if not this upcoming month.
Yeah, like you said, Tyrell, it's got to happen before they get too old, because they've literally spent about $500,000 in terms of getting these Red Heifers over the whole project, everything they've been working on. So they've spent a ton of money. First of all, you had to find them. And so they flew the 5 Red Heifers over in September 2022, after a very long search, years and years and years of trying to find a Red Heifer. Now, okay, they finally got some, brought them over. A tremendous expense, time, money, effort, energy. But like you said, all of it is going to be wasted if they don't do it before they're going to be disqualified if they get too old. So they've got to do it, And so they've got the Red Heifers. They've got the priests are ready to go, and there's all kinds of rules they have for the priests and whatever that are going to be involved in this. So they're ready to go. And, the land is owned on the Mount of Olives where it will be, the sacrifice will happen. And so, all those pieces are in place. Now there was confusion about the altar because CBS News had come out with this report saying the altar is ready, and they had done a news report on it. They had shown it to the world, and I got excited about it too. But it turns out that altar is not the altar for the Red Heifer. That altar is actually just for practicing temple sacrifices and the things they do to practice and get ready for the day when the temple will come. It's for educational purposes, for practicing for someday when the temple will be ready, but that's not the one that will be used for the Red Heifer. So turns out CBS News was wrong, so they got everyone kind of excited for nothing. But when the time comes, an altar will be put up on the Mount of Olives there. And like you, I believe they're going to try to do it this year. I believe they want to do it this year. Now, will it be before Passover? Will it be around Passover? I've been searching. I haven't been able to find any sort of confirmation. You know, that doesn't mean it's not going to happen, but I'm looking. We're all looking. We're all keeping an eye on it, because obviously this is a big thing, because then they can purify, you know, the priest. They can, even before they build the Temple Institute said we can start the sacrificial system before we even have the temple. So I don't know if they're planning to do a tabernacle or what the deal is, but they've publicly stated, hey, we could do sacrifices before a temple is even built. So I don't know exactly how it's all going to play out, but in order to do sacrifices, they need to be purified, and they need those ashes of the red heifer to do it. So I believe it's going to happen this year. Of course, if it happens, well, the Muslims are very aware of this. In fact, you know, you probably already talked with your viewers about a spokesperson for Hamas came out and said, hey, this is one of the reasons why we were so upset, why we came in on October 7th, is because of these red cows, he called them, you know. So they're very aware of it. And if a sacrifice of a red heifer happens on the Mount of Olives, overlooking the Dome of the Rock, overlooking the Temple Mount, the Islamic world is going to be very aware of it, and a lot of them, especially the radical ones, are going to go nuts, and that'll just take tensions in the region to a whole new level.
Yeah, now I've been told that the heifers are in Shiloh. I've also been told that they're kind of in hiding, and they're kind of, I've been told different things. I've been told they're kind of keeping things secret, but I've also been told that this could be live broadcasted. After the way things were, I remember with our fellowship in our backyard the last day of Sukkot, and hearing the news that morning about Israel being attacked, if they get any wind of when this is going to take place, I don't see how a second round of attacks doesn't happen again. I don't know how they're going to fight this unless the Israeli IDF is on full standby, full alert. I mean, that could be just an ugly day in and of itself. I mean, I'm sure they know what they're getting themselves into, but they better be ready, because I don't see how even the Jordanian people, I'm not sure if they own part of the Temple Mount, but I just, they're not going to just let this happen. What are your I don't know if prediction's the word, but what could you see taking place with that?
Well, I think those that are planning to do this sacrifice would be very wise to keep it quiet, very, very quiet until it actually happens, and try to be as low key as possible, because you're right. You know, the Muslims will just be furious if this actually happens. And so this could be one of the things that pushes the region into all-out war. We already talked about the attack that just happened in Damascus. Another thing is Netanyahu is saying, hey, we're going into Rafah. We don't care about the Biden administration. We don't care about the rest of the world. We're going in to get the rest of Hamas. And they really need to do that, because that's where Hamas is hiding. But when they go into Rafah, that's another red line for Hezbollah and Iran and everyone else. So that could push things over the edge too. In addition, Israel is not going to let the people that were evacuated from the northern cities go home until Hezbollah is pushed back. And Hezbollah is never going to pull back willingly. You know, according to the agreement that ended the last war between Israel and Hezbollah, Hezbollah is supposed to be north of the Litani River, but they'll never go north of the Litani River willingly. So Israel is already planning for an operation to go into southern Lebanon to push Hezbollah north of the Litani River. But once the IDF goes into southern Lebanon, Hezbollah is going to go completely nuts. It'll be all-out war. So we've got multiple points that could push things over the edge and make this an apocalyptic conflict. So, you know, at the beginning of the year, I said, I believe this is going to be a year of war. And I believe this war in the Middle East is about to go to a whole nother level.
Now, getting kind of into prophetic stuff here, Daniel 9:27, where we hear about the abomination of desolation, the Antichrist is going to come, and he's going to make a stop to the sacrifice, which sounds like there was going to be a sacrifice taking place. Do you, because it depends on who you talk to. Like I said, I've talked with Rico Cortez, I've talked with Steve Mutria, and people on both sides of the fence, some people believe there's going to be a full-on third temple stone structure completely rebuilt, which I think would take some time. But then someone like, say, like Steve Mutria is on record saying, hey, this could be the original tent of meeting. It could be something like that. In order for them to build the third temple, you would think the Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Dome of the Rock, would need completely bulldozed over. Could you see it being something as simple as the tent of meeting getting put back up there and kind of go from there?
Yeah, I think that's a very possible scenario. I think you look at Daniel 9:27, it doesn't have to be a temple. I don't believe it could be, a tabernacle, something like the tabernacle of David potentially. So, but I'm not hardcore either way. I personally, I think there's several ways that we could see that, and the Temple Institute has publicly said, I believe it's on their own website, that the sacrifices could begin before a temple is built. So I think that they're envisioning a scenario where they're doing sacrifices before there is a temple. So how is it exactly going to play out? I don't know. We shall see.
Yeah. So the next thing on my list, and who knows, this may be just another weird thing. Obviously, in Revelation, we see all the locusts coming. A locust and cicada are not exactly the same thing, but there is a rare occurrence of two broods of cicadas that's going to be taking place coming in April, towards the end of April, and it's going to sweep a good chunk of the Midwest and South and different parts of the country. Is this just a random thing, or do you think there's any type of tie-in there at all?
Well, I think the cicadas are important. I'll talk about that in a second. But in terms of the locusts and what we read about during the trumpet judgments, these locusts kind of come along about, and it says it talks about the rise of the beast out of the abyss, right? About that time. So during the second half of the trumpet judgments we read there, we're reading about the rise of the beast, his army, his supernatural forces. It's literally going to be an invasion of Earth. And these locusts are not going to be like the friendly locusts we have today that just eat stuff. That we're talking about, I believe, demonic creatures that are literally going to torture humanity. It talks about men are going to be seeking death because it's so horrible, what these locusts do. So that whole thing during the trumpet judgments is something else entirely, separate entirely. But I urge people to study that, because that whole part of the trumpet judgments and the rise of the beast out of the abyss, one of the most misunderstood parts of the book of Revelation, and it's so key because it's, it's all about the beast rising out of the abyss and coming and literally an invasion of Earth by these demonic forces. But anyway, that's a whole separate topic. But these cicadas are coming, right? And so the first time since Thomas Jefferson was president, we're going to see these cicadas coming. And it's, and I used to live in an area where they're extremely annoying, but this is being called the cicada apocalypse, because you've got your 13-year cicadas and you've got your 17-year cicadas. And the first time since Thomas Jefferson was president, they're coming out of the ground together, simultaneously. And what's interesting is that they're coming out of the ground together, but they kind of live in separate places in terms of where they inhabit in the United States. But there's an area where the two groups overlap. And where they overlap is in Illinois. And that should ring a bell because, yeah, that's where the intersection of the Great American Eclipse of 2024 and the Great American Eclipse of 2017 come together. So in the same month, in the same state where the two eclipses are intersecting, we have an intersection of these cicadas coming out of the ground at the same time. Is that a coincidence? If it is, it's pretty bizarre.
Yeah, I live in southern Iowa, which Iowa's next door to Illinois. So I remember the cicadas coming before, and yeah, they're quite annoying. Yeah, just all these things is really crazy. The interesting thing, and like I said, cicadas and locusts are not the exact same thing. And the locusts are, you're getting into the judgments there. But these cicadas are coming out of the ground, and CERN, there's concern that CERN could possibly like open up a portal. I mean, it almost, I see the parallels of these things coming out of the ground and CERN possibly opening up a portal, and what could be coming through that leads to, I mean, if you look at the locusts in Revelation, they're not your typical locusts. I mean, these are demonic being type things. And some people are on the wavelength that Satan, Hasatan, is already here. He's been thrown out of heaven for a long time. But in Revelation 12, I believe it mentions him being thrown out. And when he's thrown out, he's enraged because he knows his time's short. And there's essentially 3.5 years at that point. So there's arguments on whether, has he been completely kicked out? Has the restrainer been removed yet? But I tend to wonder, I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but I tend to wonder if this spring could possibly start the demonic realm coming to our earth in a whole nother level. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, I think we are crossing over a threshold into an entirely different period of time. And I think we're going to see supernatural things on both sides that are just going to blow our mind. From this point forward, things are going to get really crazy. So we're going to see things that are going to be just blow our minds on a regular basis. We are really moving into supernatural times. If you want to live during biblical times, you're going to get your chance, because if you're able to stay alive, that is. But things are going to get really, really wild, in my opinion, in that, as I name my new book Chaos, because that's well in advance, I've been warning my readers, this is what's coming. Tremendous chaos. Things are going to get crazy as we move forward here.
Yeah, I urge people, if we are living in these biblical last days, if we are, a couple things, I mean, there's plenty of prophecies about it, but we're told there's going to be false prophets in the last days. And one key thing I want to urge people is there's going to be an Antichrist coming, and the book actually literally says there's going to be a delusion so strong, if it were possible, even the elect would be deceived. It is going to be extremely convincing to, I would say, most people in the world that maybe Christ has returned, and to the point where he literally says, if people tell you he's returned, if people say, hey, come, Christ is here, don't go. Don't believe it. When I return, all eyes are going to see. You don't need to be told Christ is going to come. So, I mean, I don't know if in a week from now, if the New Madrid fault line, it goes, earthquake, I lose internet, and this may be the last time I'm on the internet. I have no idea, but if this is the last time you hear something, that is one thing I urge you. Hold fast to the scriptures. And if somebody tells you Christ is over here or over there, that's probably not him, because when he comes, you're going to know. So yeah. Hold fast, stay strong, stay in the word. As far as topics on this, that's all that I have wrote down. But is there anything else you want to add that is coming, or just any last words that you want to say about what's coming soon, or just in general about possibly prophecy last days?
Yeah, let me add one more thing about the eclipse that a lot of people may not know about, okay? Yep. Because, all the Torah people out there know about the Aleph and the Tav and everything that's coming, right? Because you've got the New Madrid Tav, right? Which is, you got the Great American Eclipse of 2024 and the Great American Eclipse of 2017. The intersection is over southern Illinois, right? So creating the Tav, which is, you know, in Paleo Hebrew, two wooden sticks crossing one another. You know, you've got your covenant there, the covenant of the wooden cross. But interestingly, in the exact intersection right there in southern Illinois, right in the heart of that intersection, there is actually a giant cross. It's called the Bald Knob Cross of Peace, 111 feet tall. Right in the intersection of that New Madrid Tav, we've got that giant cross. Then you look at the Texas Tav, which is the Ring of Fire eclipse of October 2023 and the Great American Eclipse of 2024. They intersect in Texas. So it's called the Texas Tav. Then right in the intersection of that Tav, you've got another giant cross, 77 feet tall, 7 inches tall. It's called the Empty Cross. It's in the Coming King Sculpture Prayer Garden in Kerrville, Texas. So for some strange coincidence, at the intersection of both of these Tavs, you've got a giant cross standing exactly at the intersection of both of them. Now, isn't that a wild coincidence? Of course, if you put both the Tavs together, you've got the giant Aleph over America, the most tightly focused Aleph over one nation in at least 1,000 years. They went back looking 1,000 years. They did, you know, might be beyond that, but they looked for at least 1,000 years. And this is the most tightly focused Aleph over one nation that 3 eclipses have formed in at least 1,000 years. So you've got the Aleph and the Tav, which Jesus, Yeshua, said in the book of Revelation, I am the Aleph and the Tav, at the beginning of the book of Revelation, at the end of the book of Revelation. So literally, we've got the 2 Hebrew letters that Jesus identified, that Yeshua identified himself with in the book of Revelation, being painted in the sky over our nation, the Aleph and the Tav, on April 8th, right there, you know. And of course, the Aleph and the Tav were there, Genesis 1:1. There's the Aleph and the Tav in Genesis 1:1, all throughout the scriptures. And all the way to the book of at the end of the book of Revelation. And Yeshua said, I am the Aleph and the Tav. Now the Aleph and the Tav are being painted over our country on April 8th. And yet very few people outside of the Torah community are talking about the Aleph and the Tav.
One more thing popped in my head, which this could be a non-factor at all. This could be a nothing, but it's just something that I've listened to, talked to a few people, and this is another possibility. But talking with Steve Mutria, and I'm not sure if you're familiar with him from TorahFamily.com, but he said that he's friends with Jim Barfield with the Copper Scroll Project, which I'm not sure if you're real familiar with that. He said there's some stuff that he knows that he can't say, and Jim Barfield, he's mentioned as well that he can't tell us everything because kind of like the Red Heifers, some stuff is secretive, but he's in the process of getting permission to dig at Qumran, and they are very positive that this year they're going to be allowed to dig, and they know where the Ark of the Covenant is now. People say it's in the Vatican. People say it's in Ethiopia. The Temple Institute believes Solomon had it underneath the Temple Mount. I have no idea exactly, but I just find it really interesting that they are claiming that we know some stuff that we can't share, but this year the Ark of the Covenant could come out. And really, in Bible prophecy, I don't really see anything about the Ark of the Covenant in the last days other than you see the Ark of the Covenant in heaven. But if you're familiar with Islamic eschatology, they believe their 12th Imam, their Mahdi, when he comes, which their prophecy, their eschatology is like a complete mirror of ours. It's really crazy, Islamic eschatology. But they believe that he is going to come with the Ark of the Covenant, and he's going to bring it back to Jerusalem. I find it's really interesting that maybe that won't happen at all. Maybe they don't even know exactly where it is. But I just find it interesting. It's just there's so many things that 2024 that very well could be happening, and very possibly in the spring feast, that I just pray that our hearts are ready. My family's heart is ready, and I'm doing all I can spiritually to be ready and prepare others, but just be watchful and sober. I mean, just Are you familiar with the Copper Skull Project? Are you familiar with Jim Barfield any, or is there anything else?
Yeah, I'm somewhat familiar with that. But speaking of the Ark of the Covenant, I have a whole chapter in my new book about the Ark of the Covenant because I do believe it's in Bible prophecy. I believe that's what Daniel 9:27 is talking about, the Ark of the Covenant. Because if you look at Daniel chapter 9, earlier in the chapter, the exact same word for covenant is used in Daniel chapter 9, and it's used for God's covenant between himself and Israel. And then that same word is used again in Daniel 9:27, the same word for covenant. And I believe that's exactly what it's talking about. Once again, it's not about some peace treaty with Israel or whatever, but I believe God is going to confirm his covenant. And of course, the physical manifestation of God's covenant that he made at Sinai was the Ark of the Covenant, and that was ultimately put in the tabernacle, then the temple. But if it is discovered, which I believe it will be discovered, I believe it will be made public, and that will be a confirmation that the covenant always existed, that it still exists today, and it will be the greatest archaeological bombshell in all of human history. And I believe it will be one of the most important prophetic bombshells in all of human history. So I'm watching for it very, very closely, and I believe that is ultimately what Daniel 9:27 is all about in terms of the covenant.
I asked my wife the other day, I said, because our former church, we now, which I don't know exactly how you or others on this channel are, we observe Saturday Sabbath, and we no longer go to a Sunday church. But the former Sunday church I went to, I used to be a board member, I used to be a Sunday school teacher, and I taught eschatology. So I'm an eschatology geek, I guess you could say. My wife, not so much. She's just a Bible geek in general, which is great. But I asked her, I said, what, because she doesn't watch these things like I do. Like if something really big pops out, she may say, hey, what do you know? But I asked her, I said, what would it take for you to be like, whoa, this is serious? And myself, if the Ark of the Covenant came out, it would just be like jaw dropping. It's like, is that the real one? Is that the real? And I'm sure there'll be several people like, no, that's just a duplicate, or they're just trying to get your attention. But I mean, we've been hearing about the red heifer sacrifice. We've been hearing about the eclipse and all these things. But I think if the Ark of the Covenant came out, that would be the big one. That's like, okay, this is, as Scott Harwell likes to say, it's about to get biblical up in here. I mean, that's just like, whoa, that would be really eye-opening.
It would be, and that's one of the things I'm watching for. So one of the big signs that I'm watching for. So when it happens, that's going to be enormous. That's going to be huge. But we're right on time for so many of these things to happen, because those of us that follow Torah, what do? We keep the 7-day week that God created in the beginning. The day begins at sundown to sundown. And the seventh day, Friday at sundown to Saturday at sundown, the seventh day we keep holy, and it's a prophetic picture of God's 7,000-year plan for humanity, because man has 6,000 years, and then the last 1,000 years is the millennium. It's when Messiah will rule from Jerusalem for 1,000 years. And so every week when we keep the weekly cycle, we keep the weekly Sabbath, we are prophetically foreshadowing the seventh day, the last day, when Messiah will rule. And so now we're getting very, very close to the end of that 6,000 years, and right on time. A lot of people said, oh, in the 80s and 90s and so forth, said Jesus could come at any time. No, he couldn't, not yet, because not enough time had passed yet. But now we're getting very, very close, and right on time, all these things are starting to happen.
All right. Well, like I said, that's all I got. Is there any final words for you before we sign off here?
Well, I could probably talk all night. I apologize for being long-winded. I tend to ramble a lot, but I appreciate you having me on. So much is about to happen, and I love talking to a Torah audience, because I have a big secular audience. I talk to Christian people. I go on Christian programs, But if you don't understand God's calendar, the feast days, the Sabbaths, all these things, and ultimately God's 7,000-year plan for humanity that we see all throughout the Torah and all throughout the scriptures, you're not really going to understand the bigger picture. So I'm so glad to be on with people that love Torah, understand Torah, keep Torah, because ultimately Torah will help us to understand the bigger picture. God told us to end from the beginning, and things will start to become clearer for all of us the closer we get to the actual events themselves. So thank you for having me on, and definitely appreciate it.
All right. Well, yes. Thank you for accepting the invitation to come on. And as you mentioned, you get to talk about these prophecy things, whether it be stuff in the world today or just individual stuff. You can spend multiple hours on each chapter. I mean, on each event in the Bible. So very fun, but fortunately we don't have forever. We have lives we got to get to. But once again, thank you for joining me, and hopefully maybe in the future we can possibly do something like this again. And keep your eyes open, stay watching. We don't know exactly that something's going to necessarily take place on April 8th, but I do believe that these are very prophetic times, and keep watching and stay in the Word. So thank you all, and shalom.